Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of my brand new podcast, Limitless with Nadia. Today, we have a very special guest. I have been following her on TikTok for a very long time, so this is kind of a surreal moment for me. But we have Miss Nicole Victoria, who is a CEO, a money coach, financial literacy advocate, and she is the founder of No Budget Babe, which is a company that helps women manage their money and grow their finances. So, everyone, please welcome Nicole Victoria. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited.
I know, me too. I'm so ready to get into it. And today we're going to be talking all about how Nicole really found her passion with this business, how she kind of started this business and became who she is today, and kind of her journey on the way there, because I'm sure there is so much that we can learn from your story. So super excited to get into it. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's go ahead and get into it. Nicole, I really would love to know about what kind of sparked you getting into this industry and starting your business. Like, where did that journey really begin?
Yeah, I guess I'll have to take it all the way back to the way that I grew up. So I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. And, in those families, it's like, hey, the way that you get ahead is you go to school, you get the university degree, you get the corporate job. So in my head, I'm like, hey, all I have to do is go to school, get the degree, get the corporate job, and like everything will be good. So I did that, graduated with $40,000 in student debt, and was just patiently, not so patiently, but awaiting the day where all of this wealth and money and happiness and success would just like fall into my life. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen, right? I'm sitting in my corporate job, I'm looking around at the people around me, and I'm like, how are they, buying houses, paying for their weddings, feeling financially stable enough for kids, and I like can't even pay my credit card bill on time? Like, what is going on? What am I missing? There's some sort of like roadmap that I didn't have access to. This really began my journey into, number one, wanting to learn more about like the purpose of life. I mean, I was just going through this quarter life crisis where I'm like, who am I? Why am I here? What's the point of anything? And then wanting to go back to, learning more about money. I wanted more money. I needed more money. So how was I going to get that? So I started learning about personal finance, and I started, at first, I was budgeting, I was doing the envelope method. I was trying all of these things, and they weren't working. I would have success for a month or two, and then I would fall back off. And through my learnings about, life and the meaning of life and all that stuff, I got really interested in learning about psychology, and mindset and behavior. And what I personally realized is it doesn't matter how much tactic you learn if you don't address the underlying reason as to why you're doing what you're doing in the first place, and really understand how to overcome the self-sabotage, how to stop getting in your own damn way. So I went back to the drawing board again, and through some, like deductive reasoning, I'm looking at budgets and I'm like, most people that try to budget fail, right? Statistics show that most people that try to budget fail. And I was like, if it was just as easy as writing your expenses down on a piece of paper, nobody would be struggling with money. So this obviously doesn't work, right? I'm like, there has to be another way. So that's when I actually developed what I now call the Make Money Moves method. It's my 5-step process to, changing your financial situation, upgrading your finances, changing your life. But without all of that shame and restriction and blame that comes along with traditional personal finance advice. Traditional personal finance tells you, that it's your coffee is the reason why you can't buy a house, and your avocado toast is the reason why you can't pay off your student loans, without understanding that there are so many other things going on beneath the surface that really need to be addressed for you to be able to start making more money, and then learning how to put that money into places where you're going to be able to derive the most happiness possible out of every dollar that you have.
I love that. And I think it's so important for people to recognize that not all the financial advice that you're seeing or getting is actually makes sense, and it's not actually going to help you get results. And I would love to know a little more about specifically the inclination that you had to look into the psychology of it, because I think the basis of everything is the psychology of it. Like, what is the main motivator behind what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing? Because if you don't understand that, then you're blind to pretty much everything else. So what made you really want to explore the psychology behind our money-making decisions?
I think a lot of it came from, there was this book that I read called The Art of Life. And, just understanding why people struggle with happiness. Like I started reading a lot about like Stoicism and Buddhism
Mhm.
and understanding kind of like the deeper reasons why people are unhappy, and then
Mhm.
kind of just like making that connection between the two. Well, we're unhappy because we're wanting, but we're wanting because we're told that we always don't have enough. And what does
Mhm.
enough actually look like to us? We're in this kind of culture of overconsumption, and not that spending money is bad. There's nothing wrong with spending money. I love when people
Mhm.
spend money on things that make them happy. A lot of times what I'm seeing is that people are spending money on things that they think are making them happy, but is actually bringing them
Mm.
further from happiness. So I have this
Mhm.
example. There was a student who was interviewing for a spot in my program, and she was
Mhm.
talking to one of our intake managers about the fact that she was unable to go to her best friend's engagement party for financial reasons, and she was like visibly upset. She was really upset about this, and it broke my heart to see. 5 minutes later in the conversation, they're talking about, okay, well, where is your money going? What are you spending your money on?
Mhm.
And she kind of lit up and she was like, I go out and I see cute things and I, buy like a nice shirt or whatever it is. But the thing is, she was so upset, right? She was so upset about not being able to do this other thing. However, she was spending money in these other ways.
Mhm.
Maybe if there was a different alignment in the way that she was spending her money, she
Mhm.
might have been able to do this thing that was really important to her. Like, imagine you go to sleep every night and you're like, oh my God, I wish I could buy a house. Like, I wish I could buy a house. That's the thing that would make me the happiest in this world. But then in the morning, you wake up, you're like, oh, I don't have a house. I'm in this crappy rental apartment. I'm unhappy. I'm going to
Yep.
go buy something for that dopamine hit, not realizing that all of those things that you're buying to make you happy, that money
Mhm.
could have gone towards the actual goal that would have changed your life and brought you that real happiness.
Oh my God, so true. And this is also why in my own coaching, like, so I help women get into alignment with what they actually want out of life. That's a big part of the program is let's get very clear on what that actually means for you, because people think that they want certain things that they actually don't really want. There's either a more there's a deeper underlying desire at the core of it, but it's just so important to get in touch with what you actually want so that you can determine if your behaviors, specifically with your spending habits, are aligned with that. How do you help women like figure out what will actually bring them value or what kinds of things are worth spending money on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and it's so interesting. So people will come into the program and they're like, when I get to the investing module, it's going to be the hardest. And they're so worried about it. And they're like, oh my God. And they get to module 3, which is actually the goal setting module. And when we take
Mhm.
them through this process and they realize that they actually can have any life that they want. And the
Mhm.
reason why they're following the path right now that they're on is likely because somebody else has told them to follow it. Like,
Yes.
their mind it's like, if the path ahead of you is clear, you're
Mhm.
probably following somebody else's path. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting because people are like, "Oh my God, I don't have to buy a house." No, you don't have to buy a house. I don't have to get married. No, you don't have to do you don't have to do anything. You only
Yeah.
have to do the things that make you happy. So trying to figure that out really goes back to understanding, what our values are. And I think
Mhm.
people may think they know what their values are, but have you ever actually sat down and thought about that? Because for me, when I was able to figure out, okay, my two main values in life are freedom and family. Okay. So
Mhm.
everything that I do, I can go back to those values and say, does this get me closer to my overall values of freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, whatever it is, and
Mhm.
family? Because when you live your life in alignment with your values, right, and as you're working towards your goals,
Mhm.
that's when you find your happiness.
And that's what I call like getting into alignment is knowing very clearly what your goals are and living in alignment with those goals. So a lot of people I feel live their life on autopilot. Like you said, when they're following a path that they think makes the most sense or that they think is what they really want. But then usually people have to reach a point where they have to look around and be like, I actually don't like anything about my life at all. I'm not living in alignment at all. Before they realize that, okay, I need to change something, my value, something about my like path just isn't making sense for me, and I need to figure out what my true path actually looks like. I want to know, like with you specifically, what drives your passion for what you do in terms of being a coach.
I know the process works because it worked for me, right? It's worked for
Mhm.
me, it's worked for family, it's worked for friends. But every time I have a student come through the program and I see their wins and I see them change their lives, like I just had somebody come through and she was like, because of you, I will be the end to generational poverty. And I just like, I
Oh,
freaking broke
wow.
down. Like, it's just, I'm gonna cry.
Oh my God, no, that's incredible.
It's so amazing. You know, we have so many women that are coming through our program that have, you know, escaped abusive situations and they're starting their lives over. Oh my God, I'm actually gonna cry. Sorry.
Oh my God, if you need to cry, cry it out because it's a very beautiful thing what you're doing.
It's so crazy. And every time, you know what, being online, and I'm sure you know, being online can just be kind of shitty sometimes, but every time I'm
Hmm.
having a shitty day, I always end up getting like a message from someone. Um, oh, I'm gonna take a second.
It's a lot. Like when you're a coach and you help people transform their lives, it's a very emotional experience because you realize the impact that you're having on somebody else.
It's
And it's,
crazy.
yeah,
You know, I've had a bad day, it never fails. I'll get an email that my VA will send over, or I'll check my DMs, or I'll check our Facebook group, and somebody is just like,
hmm,
because of you, and not even just people that work with me, but people that follow us online and take our free resources. There, because of
yeah,
you, I was able to do X, Y, and Z. And for somebody that grew up watching a lot of people go through financial trauma, you know, abusive situations, that kind of thing, it weighs really heavily on me. So to be able to be that person that's able to provide this education to people in a way that they're able to like take it and not feel overwhelmed and not feel that shame and not feel that blame of like that person, that traditional personal finance shit, is
yeah.
just, it's amazing. And it's just, yeah.
I love it. I love it. And something I have a curiosity here. Did you ever see yourself, obviously, like while you were working that corporate job and like before you built this business, did you ever see yourself doing this kind of work or did your curiosity just kind of lead you there?
I didn't even know that doing something like this was possible. I just thought that you went to school and you got the corporate job and then you worked your way up the corporate ladder.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I read the book, The 4 Hour Work Week, that my eyes were open to the possibility of a different way of life. I was like, oh shit, what? You don't have to work 40 hours a week until you're
Yeah.
65? Like, that's a thing. There are people doing this.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started selling real estate, my boss had told me about his brother, and his brother had bought this property, and it was a triplex, and he would like live in one unit, then renovate it, and then move into the next unit and renovate it, whatever. He did this over a couple of years, and then
Hmm.
ended up selling this property for like, you know, a couple $1 million profit, and then moved his whole family to Bali. And I was like, oh, damn.
It's
That's
really
so
possible.
cool. Yeah, like I don't want to live here. I want to live somewhere hot and beautiful and just like, you know, relax
Hmm.
on the, like if I'm going to choose my dream life, like that's what my dream life looks like. So
Literally.
there's kind of just been like these pivotal moments every step of the way. And I've been so lucky that I've been exposed to so many incredible mentors and bosses and that kind of thing that have helped shape my view of what's possible for me.
Hmm.
But that's kind of how it started. I mean, why I actually started the business was, you know, I was always the person that like friends and family went to when they had kind of financial questions, business questions, investing questions. Um,
Hmm.
but in the beginning of the pandemic, I really saw that there were so many people that just like they didn't know, right? They didn't have this. And in the beginning of the pandemic, like I was really worried too. I mean, it was a very scary time. However, from a financial standpoint, I was okay because I had an emergency fund and I had all these other things going on. And that's when I
Hmm.
realized, oh shit, like this isn't like common knowledge. Everybody doesn't know about this. Everybody doesn't have access to these resources. So I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna start like a social media account. I don't know who's gonna
Hmm.
follow me. I started our Instagram account. Was it May 2020? From 0 followers. Like I was like, who's gonna follow me? I have 0 followers. Who was gonna
Oh
be
my
the first
God.
person to follow me?
Yeah.
And it started growing slowly at first. I ended up going on TikTok because I saw so many people making like, you know, when they were doing in the beginning of TikTok, when everybody was just doing
Yeah.
like voiceovers and that kind of thing. I was like,
Yep.
oh, I want to make some of those fun videos for my Instagram. So I made a TikTok
Hmm.
account simply just to like use the editing software and then like pull the videos over to Instagram.
Hmm.
And I posted my first video. And then my phone started blowing up, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And I went back and I was
Viral.
like, oh shit, my video went viral, like one of my first
Hmm.
videos. And I was like,
Hmm.
this is really cool. And
Hmm.
that's when I kind of I was like, oh, okay, like the dopamine, right? I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, okay, I'm gonna go back and post more on TikTok.
Yeah.
And that just exploded. And from there, it's been crazy. We've served over 160,000 students through our programs. I got a
Wow.
book deal. I've been featured in like Business
Wow.
Insider, like just so many so many crazy and incredible things have happened because of it. And I have helped so many people. And it's been a freaking wild ride, man.
Oh my God, I love this for you. Everything about it is so inspiring. And there's specifically one thing I want to touch on. When you said that it really all started with you when you were in that corporate job, you were in that environment where you were following a path that clearly was just not doing it for you. And it took somebody else's story and seeing what they did and seeing that there is potential to create a life like that, that kind of spurred the, oh shit, that could be me too. Like I could totally do that. Like it's not just other people that have access to that kind of a lifestyle. Like I could totally build that for myself. And I think it's important for people to recognize that whenever you see something that inspires you to that level, that creates that feeling, that spark of like, oh my God, wait, that's amazing. Follow that, because that's usually your intuition trying to push you in the direction of something that's going to help you get to where you actually want to go. And specifically when it comes to what got you into starting this business, I think it's really also important to pay attention to the fact that it never started with the intention of making money. It started with the intention of wanting to help people, of wanting to spread the word about something that you were personally passionate about. That's similar to like the way that I kind of ended up doing what I was doing. Is I never knew from the beginning that I was going to be an alignment coach. I never knew from the beginning that I was going to be helping people in the way that I was. It started with a natural curiosity and a natural inclination for me of like, I'm really fascinated by this. Like personally, this gives me a spark of like, I need to do a deep dive into what the hell all of this stuff even means. You know, reading Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, all those mindset, psychology books, all the same stuff. Less about like money and more about like manifestation and stuff like that. But regardless, I just followed what felt good for me and then shared about it on social media, and then it blew up. And it's because the intention is to follow something that feels right for you, not because you want to create stability or because you want to like make money out of it. It's like you're following what you love because you love it, and then all this amazing stuff happens as a result. So I think that's really important for people to know and to really pay attention to, is that like probably aren't going to know exactly where you're going to end up or what your story is going to look like, but it starts with recognizing that there's infinite potential and then just following the things that excite you in the moment, that you feel kind of like pulled towards, without ignoring it. Because I think another thing is that people allow themselves to be bullied by their environment in terms of like, well, you're supposed to do this. Like we said, right? You need to get a traditional degree. You need to get a 9-to-5 job. That's what's going to bring you stability. And obviously, like having created a business for yourself and kind of getting unstuck from that position, you realize like, wait, there's so much more freedom that I can have. There's so much more I can create for myself when I'm not stuck in that. So I would love to talk more about how like the trap that people fall into, because I get a lot of clients that I work with, people that apply to my program, that are just like, I'm working this 9-to-5 job. I did everything I thought I was supposed to do, and it's just not cutting it. I want so much more for myself. So there was a specific question I wanted to ask you with that. In terms of the like clients that you work with and the women that you work with, how do you help them kind of start to get unstuck from that place?
Kind of going back to what you were saying, when I was like, hey, I saw these other people doing these incredible things and I thought, well, why not me?
Mm-hmm.
That is the most important part. Well, why not me? It's that growth
Yes.
mindset. It's that grit, because a lot of people will see, other people that have what they want and they'll think that they're the exception, not the rule. But what
Yes.
they don't understand is that if it's been done before, that in and of itself means that it is possible, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
possible. You just need to figure out how to do it for you in your own situation with your own strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing, coming back to just mindset, right? Being in that growth mindset where two people can go through the exact same things, but they come out completely differently. There's this kind of like anecdote or this story that I like to share. Because I think it's important for people to take responsibility for where they are and responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for their actions afterwards by getting into that
Mm-hmm.
growth mindset, right? Not thinking that, okay, the world is stacked against me. These things are all happening. Cause like I went through that too, right? When I came out of university and I had all these student loans, I was pissed off. I was angry. I was like, all these people, their parents paid for their school. All these people, their parents bought them a house, and the government and this and society. And I was just like, I was so angry. I was so pissed off. I felt like I had just been dealt like this shitty hand, right? I'm like dealing with this childhood trauma and I'm living in this shitty rental apartment. And I'm just like, I moved out for the first time at 16, right? So I was just
Mm-hmm.
angry. I was just pissed off. And what I didn't realize was that it's not my fault that those things happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility for
To
how I
pivot.
take action afterwards. So the anecdote that I like to share is like, imagine you were going across the street. So you go to cross the street, you press the little walk button, you wait for the light to turn green, you start walking across the street, and then a car runs the red and hits you. Right, hits you, breaks both your legs. You're in the hospital. The doctor comes in, and the doctor's like, "You're going to have to go through 6 months of physio so that you're able to walk properly again." And you're like, "Dad, this isn't my fault." Right? I did everything right. I stopped at the thing. I pressed the button. I waited for the green light. It's that other guy's fault. Okay, so you're like, because it's not my fault, I'm not going to take any responsibility. I don't want to do this. I don't want to spend my time, my money, my energy. I'm not going to physio. But then you spend the rest of your life in pain, walking with a cane, not being
Crippled.
able to, exactly, not being able to do the things that you would have been able to do had you just taken the responsibility to overcome the shit that happened to you. Because yes, shit's always going to happen to you, right? But the way that you come out ahead in life is by looking at that shit and then working through it.
Yes. Oh my God, I totally agree. And I think like that's a big thing that does tend to keep people stuck is being like, well, it wasn't my fault. Like I was taught this my whole life. Like I was told I had to go to school. I didn't have a choice. And it's like, okay, maybe that is the case, but you are where you are now. There's nothing that you can do about it besides decide how you want it to look like going forward. You can't change anything about what's been done. And even if it was kind of your fault, like even if, okay, you decided to get a 4-year degree and go into this field and like, you were doing your best with what you knew at the time, but now that you know better, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to change that? Are you going to stay complacent or are you going to decide that, you know what? No, I know what I want my life to look like and I'm going to just go for it.
Yeah, like you don't want to throw good money after bad, right? And it's the same thing, I see this all the time where people say similar things to me. I've been doing this job for X years. I went and I got this degree. I'm not happy. Do I continue with it? Well, you're never like it's the sunk cost fallacy. Like you're never going to get that money back. You're never going to get that time back. So are you going to continue putting more good money and good time into something that you hate? Or are you going to say, okay, you know what, enough's enough. And I'm going to start putting my time, my energy, my money into something that is actually going to bring me the life that I want. And if not, if you decide that no, that time and money that you've invested is worth more than your happiness, then that's up to you. But you need to be the one to make that decision and you need to be happy moving forward with it because it's your life and you only get one.
I frame it similarly of like, you have the present moment and there's always infinite potential in the present moment. You are manifesting everything about your circumstances based on what you're doing right here and right now. If you are using your present moment to ruminate on the past shit that you've done that's already gone, you're actually perpetuating that past and you're living it over and over and over again. Where in the pain and it's like a constant, you're on a wheel, it's on autopilot at that point. Whereas you could just start fresh, wipe the slate completely clean and realize this is the present moment. The only thing that's tying the present moment to the past is my own brain. So you can sever that cord and decide, you know what, fresh slate, this is the like present moment. I decide what I want to do with it. And that's how you change the direction and the trajectory of your future is by realizing that it's right here and right now. I can do whatever I want with it. Am I going to spoil it by thinking about all the past shit that I'm so angry about that didn't go my way, all the negative stuff? Or are you going to be like, no, let me start paying more attention to what I do want and actually start taking steps to get there? So I think a lot of people definitely fall into that pattern of getting stuck in the past as opposed to just empowering themselves to take different steps forward. There's something else I wanted to ask you. In terms of obviously financial literacy, what is usually the number one myth or the number one like thing that women struggle with that you have to really focus on changing for them or like reframing?
Okay, two things. The thought that making more money will change everything for them. And then the thought that they have to work hard to make money. More money has the ability to change your life, but only if you know what to do with it. Right. So many times, I mean, what's the statistic? 40% of 6-figure earners are living paycheck to paycheck. And that's why when somebody tells me, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I'm like, that tells me nothing about your actual financial situation. Right. Because there are so many reasons. It's not necessarily just like a lack of income problem. It could be, overextending yourself on certain expenses. And usually like the problems come down to not like your little things that you're buying, your coffee, your avocado toast, whatever day to day. It's those big things like the car and the housing and that kind of stuff. And again, spending money is not the enemy, but spending out of alignment with your values and your goals is. So if somebody were to come to me and they said, I had this all the time. I had clients when I was selling real estate in Toronto. They're spending 50% of their income on housing, and traditional budgeting would tell you it shouldn't be more than like 30%. And so to traditional personal finance, it looks like this person's made like bad, like don't do that. But the thing is, they were able to make it work because living downtown, right, being close to work, being walkable, being close to their friends was a high value to them. What they didn't value was having a vehicle. They didn't have kids, so they didn't have daycare costs. They didn't, all of these other things. So meanwhile, they were spending more in one area. They weren't spending as much in other areas that didn't mean the same amount to them. So it's just about realigning those values. The other thing that I said was that the harder you work, the more money you will make, or that you have to work hard to make money. These are these money scripts, these money rules. So by the time that we're 7 years old, psychologists agree that typically you have created all of the rules, the money scripts that you will use to run your life based on what you've seen, based on what you've heard.
Wow. By the age of 7?
By the age of 7. Okay. And this is why it is so important, because if you have not updated your money beliefs and your money rules, that all debt is bad, that rich people are assholes, that, who'd she have to screw to get that job? Like all of these things that you hear, right? They become ingrained in you, and they start to become the basis that you use to make your decisions, whether you realize it or not. And that is why so many people have these money rules and money scripts that are running their lives that they don't realize, that are not serving them, growing them, or making them happy, and are actually making their lives harder. If they don't take the opportunity to rewrite those money scripts in a way that is actually going to serve them, they're going to continue to perpetuate these patterns, whether or not they realize it. So again, if they have this belief that making money has to be hard, or you have to work hard to make money, you will always work hard to make money, because things like investing, it goes against your rules, it goes against your bias. Well, that's not possible, that's not realistic, there's no way that you can make that much money investing. And if I showed you some of my investing statements, like I was just looking at one yesterday, because we're doing taxes and stuff, and I'm like, damn, right, I cannot believe that I have made this much money, right? Like I've retired my husband, right? Our family makes over 6 figures a year from our investment income. That's money. I don't have to work for that. Like that's just money that comes in. It supports our lifestyle. It supports our children. Now my husband's able to be home with like me and the kids. I work from home. Like it's just, we've been able to change our lives. And if I didn't believe that it was possible, and this is why I say personal finance, 80% mindset and behavior and 20% tactic. And that's why I teach both, right? Because it's like, if you don't update what you believe is possible for you, you will never take aligned action, and you will never take the steps necessary to get you to the life that you really want.
Totally agree. And I think this all goes back to the law of assumption, which is a basic universal principle that the things that you believe to be true without needing proof, those are the things that you end up manifesting. That becomes your reality. And it's all subjective is the craziest part to me, is like you can choose what beliefs you subscribe to. If something isn't working, you get to unsubscribe from that and subscribe to something that actually makes sense for you. So that's something that I also tell people when I'm helping people in my program to like manifest better, like more money and help like increase their like how much they're bringing in every month. It's like you are probably coming into this thinking that I can't make that much money unless I work really hard. And because you're not inclined, you don't want to work really hard, you're not going to bother. And so that becomes something that you just can't achieve. You have a big red X mark on that, and that's done. Like you're not even going to look for it. You're not even going to act, like take any steps towards it. That's it. So law of assumption is so important. I agree. When it comes to your money beliefs in particular, like what are the things that you believe to be true about money, and are they harming you or are they helping you? And if it's harming you, how can you reframe it into something that's a growth mindset of like, no, I can change this. I can do what I want. I can create whatever I want. And you can also create the conditions to be getting whatever you want. So yeah, money doesn't have to be hard if you don't want it to be hard. Money can be easy as hell, which is exactly what you teach, right? And there was something else that you said going back to like what people spend their money on, like it matters whether or not it aligns with your values. And I've shared this on the podcast before, but like I used to think that buying my morning coffee every morning from Starbucks was making me broke, and that I would feel so guilty, and I'd be like, oh my God, like I can't get rich, or I can't like do better for myself because I just keep spending $4 a day on coffee. But then when I started getting into mindset, I was like, hold up. The coffee, the $4 a day on coffee has nothing to do with it. And it has everything to do with how I'm framing purchasing my morning coffee. So when I was looking at it as like a net loss of like, okay, I'm spending this $4 and I'm losing the money, and I'm just like, now I'm feeling guilty because I didn't need the coffee. That was putting me in a position where I was manifesting like not really great finances for myself. But then when I decided to switch it and be like, how can I focus on the value that I'm getting for the coffee? Because my morning coffee is actually really important to me. It's less about the coffee itself and more about going in my car every morning and driving to Starbucks that I love. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to start looking at this as buying my morning coffee is aligned with my values because it helps me start my day on the right foot. It helps me get my head together. Caffeine, who doesn't love caffeine, right? So like once I started focusing on that, of the value that I'm getting from my morning coffee, I wasn't focusing on the lack of what I was losing on it. I was focusing on the value that I was gaining. And when you're aware, like where awareness goes, energy flows. I talk about that all the time. So it's like, because my awareness was on the value that I'm getting from spending my spending the money on my morning coffee and feeling grateful that I even had the money to spend $4 a day on my coffee, that's when things actually started to change. So I feel like with the values thing, it's like you need to be able to spend money on something and love what you're buying, because that energy that you're putting into it, that determines how things are playing out for you. I'm so like glad that you teach that, because that's so important for people to recognize, like, what are you really spending money on, and do you even give a shit about it? Do you even care about it?
Exactly. Is it actually bringing you happiness? Is it actually bringing you fulfillment? Because again, the whole point of money is that money is a tool to build your dream life. And if you are going to trade an hour of your life for money, we get 700,000 hours in a lifetime if we're lucky. And if you are going to trade one of those limited hours for money, get the most happiness possible out of every dollar that you are spending. And when you were saying the thing about, being worried about spending $4 a day on coffee, that can even come back to something like a scarcity mindset, right? Where we don't feel like we have enough, and we never feel like we're going to have enough. And unfortunately, a scarcity mindset is never conducive to building wealth, because you are so worried about today, even if it's not based in reality. Just the feeling, just the thought of scarcity, right, can have the same effects and impacts on your brain as living in poverty, right? This was studied by, I think it was a Harvard psychologist and some other economist, I can't remember. But essentially their study showed that a scarcity mindset, feeling like you don't have enough, even if you do, right, just the feeling of it can cause your brain to have the same impacts as living in poverty. It causes you to have problems making long-term financial decisions, because you're so worried about today that you can't think about the future. It's like running your computer with 50,000 tabs open, right? Your brain gets bogged down. It can have the same impact on your mind as alcoholism, as not sleeping for a night, right? These are really, really big things. And we don't realize how much this impacts us. And the scarcity can cause us to, have other behaviors like, financial avoidance, being scared to open up our bills, being scared to look at what we owe on our banks, like whatever it is. And this just further perpetuates the problem. It puts us in debt. It impacts our credit scores. It impacts our ability to save and invest for the future, because we're way too scared to put our money somewhere where we can't feel it, right? And and this is why I believe that it all comes back to mindset and behavior. Once you learn that, then you can learn the $1 million tactic, like how to manage your money and how to invest it, how to grow it, all that stuff. But if you don't have the foundation, the tactic is never going to work for you.
Oh my God. And that's so true. Because like you said, everything starts with your mindset. Like if you want to change anything in the external and your physical 3D reality, it all starts in here. It doesn't start by changing the actions themselves. It's like you need to take a minute to reflect on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's how you can get started on changing it. So love that mindset. All right, we are back and we are ready to introduce the Limitless Challenge of the week. So, Nicole, at the end of every episode, we've been giving listeners a challenge to do until the next episode comes out to start integrating what they've learned in the episode. So, what do you think we should have our listeners do as our Limitless Challenge of the week for this week?
Okay, so in January, we launched our new free investing masterclass. And basically what it does is teaching you how you can get started investing, how you can start making money while you sleep, and how you can start growing your wealth without working any harder.
Amazing. Okay, so you heard it here first. It's going to be the free investing masterclass. We will link it for you guys down below so that you can take a look at that. You can also find Miss Nicole on Instagram and TikTok. We will link both of those below as well. And you can also join her free Facebook group called Master Your Money and Build a Bank Account That Never Stops Growing, because who doesn't want to build a bank account that never stops growing? So you'll be able to check all of those out. We will link them down below. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. I have loved this conversation. I'm sure listeners are going to love the conversation as well. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that that's great. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on here.
All right, you guys, that's it for episode 7 of Limitless with Nadia. I will be back next week with another episode. But in the meantime, do not forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel Past Your Bedtime for the video version of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you guys next week.